Cool. So, hello. We're both old friends now. I think for a couple of weeks. That's pretty old, isn't it? So I'll just introduce myself. I'm a Muslim. I do happiness classes, and I'm very interested in talking about how religion in general, because I do support all religions in the original form, in getting people to a happier place so we can have a happier, better society. You know, if people are happier, they're less mean to people and stuff like that. And I want to have a practical influence. I'm really interested in having a one-to-one deep dive into helping or working on one particular working with you, you know, like as an idea. Anyway, can you tell me something about yourself? Tell me all the juicy details. Like, would you describe yourself just to make people excited? Are you an ex-Muslim?
I mean, I guess you could say that. I mean, I don't know if I was ever a proper Muslim to begin with.
Cool. And just to make it even more exciting, I totally understand why he's an ex-Muslim, if you want to label himself that way, because I don't think you were told anything particularly useful. That's really important. If you're just told an ideology, a dogma, this is what you should do, you should prostrate, you should do all that, and you never get anything from it, then I don't blame you for leaving. What did you get attracted towards? Buddhism or something?
At the moment, that's kind of my favorite thing in the world.
Cool. So let's jump straight into it. How do you overcome fear of failure? So I'm just going to give some ideas, and you give some ideas, and then hopefully somebody will benefit. Who knows, right? Okay. So fear of failure depends on your idea of success. Right? So if you have an idea of success that is really hard to achieve, then you're going to have a greater fear of failure. And we fear failure because we want to feel successful every day. You don't want to feel successful maybe one day in the future, because while you're not being successful, you're a failure. And it feels bad, right? You're missing something, you're not feeling complete. And so my idea of success, where you can be a success every day and really easily be a good person. And that, I say my idea, that's the one that sits best with modern psychology. Psychology tells us if you want to be happy, you've got to have meaning. Meaning means doing things for other people. So that's my first introductory thoughts. I'm interested in your thoughts about success, failure, whatever.
Yes, I mean, I'd kind of agree basically with most of what you said. I'll just add a few things. I guess, yeah, I mean, we have to define what is success to begin with, and I suppose it's, I mean, should I talk into the religion side of things now,
yeah,
or should we get to that a bit later, maybe?
No, get straight into it. No particular order. I'm very intrigued about, it's not like a Islam, actually, yeah, it is. I think it'll be good. Islam versus Buddhism,
no, we're not
possibly.
going to get into a massive debate like those people over there.
Oh, no. I mean, you know me. I don't do the shouty, screamy stuff. I kind of like to be more intellectual. But just to make it, it's worth, if you're searching for the truth, it's worth kind of digging straight into it, not hiding from anything. So we can look at it that way. But anyway, I'm really interested in what have you got from Buddhism that has helped you fight the fear of failure. Okay. Oh, a lot of F's there. I love that.
Well, I guess just for the people watching, I'll kind of talk about the story I told you, which was kind of where I felt, well, so far, probably one of the lowest moments of my life so far, where I kind of felt like I was failing. So, without, I'll kind of go through it very quickly. So, I was talking to someone at my university one day in 2019. I said, I don't like this kind of music. It was a tour. I didn't like this person's tour. And I was explaining why I didn't like it, and then these people, well, this guy came in passing, heard me saying that, and he said, oh, I don't like that, you're very negative, you disrespected this and that, and this, and this person, that person. You disrespected his taste in music? No, he said, because, okay, we were studying jazz, right, at music college, and he said, you disrespected the entire history of jazz, the community, and the founding fathers. Because I said this one person, I didn't think they had a very good tour. And he also said that he hadn't actually listened or known anything about this tour, but he said it was my attitude that disrespected the entire legacy and history of jazz.
So, and that made you depressed?
Made me a mini depression, because this was on like a Friday, so kind of over the weekend I was kind of just moping around, being very miserable, doing nothing.
Cool. And so now you're looking back at it, and you've done some, let's say, spiritual development of some sort, call it Buddhism, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Can you work out what the root of the problem was and what is some solutions that you've learned?
Well, yes. So the reason I got so upset was mainly it was very embarrassing. First of all, because this happened. It was kind of like this kind of setting. There was about 2 other people were sitting down in the cafeteria, just having a conversation, and then this guy kind of was saying, kind of disrespecting me, and it was quite embarrassing as well, because I was kind of trying to defend myself, and I wasn't doing a very good job of it, and it was very embarrassing. But also, it was the embarrassment basically came from the desire of wanting to have a good reputation, basically. And that was mainly I came to the conclusion that's why I got so upset.
And I would agree. And so what would be a solution to overcome that? I'm sure this will help loads of people.
Okay. Well,
can I just interrupt one more time? I believe in Buddhism. I believe Buddha, the original teaching of Buddha, are going to be really helpful. So I say it's this versus that. But I just think the teachings of Islam are more advanced and more detailed, is all I'm going to say. But they come from God. Anyway, you're going to say some solutions from Buddhism to overcome the fear, another fear of anguish of losing status, maybe. Or what was the word he used?
Well, I said good reputation, but status fair as well.
Yeah.
Well, we have to. Well, I guess we have to go to what success is. I mean, really, I guess it's kind of just a conceptual thing. First of all, I mean, this is kind of diving right into the deep sort of enlightenment of Buddhism, because the enlightened mind does away with all conceptuality altogether, like good and bad and success and failure. But I guess on a conventional level, I mean, I guess the successful things we consider in our life, we have to realize that they're kind of impermanent. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, last month on the 28th of September, I got my degree, and that was kind of like a success for me. But then, kind of ever since getting the degree, like, the nice feeling kind of went away very quickly, actually, to be honest.
What you described is perfectly described. Well, we talked about this last week. You were in my class about addiction, and it says, in Islam, they say, the people who hide from the light of God, that's the guidance of God, their only alternative is to chase a mirage. So a mirage is an illusion that this will make you, it will quench your thirst if you finally achieved it. So for you, for example, is get that degree, then I'll finally be happy. And when you get the degree, it's a bit of a disappointment. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, no, I wasn't a disappointment. I was happy to have the degree. I spent all this money and went to all these classes and did all this study. So, but then it's just kind of like, it's a bit, well, it's like I've got to do in the real world now. It's like, there's like a success, but then it's kind of like an impermanent thing. So Buddhism, impermanence was one of the fundamentals of it. So we got to realize that, if we achieve something worldly, like
what is permanent, therefore, that you are heading towards?
Okay, well, get to that in a second gradually, but impermanence first.
Okay.
So like with this degree, I kind of got it, and then it's nice, but then it's kind of faded, because now it's like, well, I got to get the job, I have a current job, and then this job's paying me badly, so I got to get a second job, and then it's like, even if I got this job, it's like, I could lose it at any moment, and so at the same time, though, it's like, even if something doesn't go your way, it's like, well, it's not the end, there's always progress to be made. And so really what Buddhism says is that it's not saying, oh, we shouldn't strive to have our job, and we shouldn't have this nice car and nice house, nice wife and nice family and all that. It's not really saying that, but it's just saying, we got to, we can enjoy those things, but we got to realize, we have to acknowledge fully that, at any given moment we could lose all those things. We can lose our family, sadly, or, our home, our nice car, even our jobs and everything. And
so of course, how does that stop you from being more depressed, because you're just being aware that you could lose everything? There must be something that you can have instead.
Yes. I mean, what Buddhism teaches is, the Buddhism that I've kind of been studying these past 2 years, which is mainly the Tibetan thing, is, first of all, it's realizing those kind of impermanence things with our success and failure, the impermanence of both of those things. But then, what is permanent? And on a conventional level, what it says is it's our service to other people. And that's why compassion is very important, especially in Tibetan Buddhism. Because if you look at something like the 8 verses for training the mind, which is kind of basically is kind of a work of absolute genius, in my opinion, because it basically encapsulates the fundamentalism of a Buddhist tradition that's over 1,000 years old in about 1 minute. And really, 7 out of 8 verses is all about basically your compassion for humanity, but also all sentient beings. And so what Buddhism says is that that is, on a conventional kind of worldly level, that is something that is basically less impermanent, because it says, you know, serve, you know, humanity and sentient beings, and without expectation of a reward, because that's kind of a bit more permanent. Because if you're doing something for someone and you expect them to, you know, there's no guarantee they'll do you something in return. But, you know, if you just you know, you have that continuity if you're just doing something without reward, because then it's like, well, who can stop you, you know?
Yeah, and that's 100% in line with the teaching of the Quran, because we are, as a Muslim, is supposed to be described in the Quran as a servant of the gracious Lord. A gracious, in the meaning, Rahman means the person who gives without any expectation back. So that's perfectly in line with Islam.
Just to kind of make things full circle with my own story, I mean, at the time, actually, it was mainly just kind of duty I had, that kind of... It didn't really help me that... It helped me a little bit, because I kind of had to go to, you know, I had to actually do a presentation in this elementary school, actually, on Monday, so duty helped me, and in that sense, just duty to my fellow classmates, because... which kind of ties into the service thing, actually, that we were talking about. You know, service, because if I didn't do that, because... Well, basically, someone... I was in charge of bringing some equipment to do this presentation, so you know, if I had to do with the presentation as well, but I also was in charge of bringing equipment to the elementary school to help with the presentation. So if I couldn't go, then all these people would be let down. So it's kind of tying into that service thing. Yeah. And but of course, like service, it's not just you know, practical things like helping someone, you know, with the equipment. It can be simpler than that, because it could just be like wishing someone well, wishing someone to be free from harm. You know, that's like in Buddhism they have what's called the dedication of merit, and that's basically where people they do a ceremony called the puja, and they basically offer their prayers for all sentient beings. There's also a practice called chod, which is it was invented by a yogini actually called Machig Lapdron. She invented it, and what it involves is that you have a drum and a bell, and you're singing some prayers, and whilst that's going on, you're basically visualizing that your body is being cut up into little pieces and placed in a skull cup, and then all the living beings of the planet are drinking from that cup. I mean, that's kind of a bit morbid, actually, but it's kind of saying, you know, it's the idea of offering yourself to help other people, and I think it's very, very helpful, and it's certainly helped me. You know, even just from that basic level before I knew anything about Buddhism.
So I'm going to say some good thing why I think what you're saying is fantastic in so many ways, right? So I half made a comment that, yes, that's what you're saying about being of service to people without anything getting back is in line with Quran, which is nice by itself. But why is that so important in today's age? Is because people have this idea, especially when I say people, we're talking about a Western idea of love, okay, which is expecting something back, right? And then that's not really love. If you do something with some expectation, and that puts you in a state of anxiety automatically, if you're assuming you're going to get something back or you deserve something back for being kind, right? You have to be gracious, like God is, who gives you air and doesn't expect anything back, right? That's how, if you're a follower of God and you're a servant of God, you have to be like God, is the idea in the Quran. And so this is just in line with that. And then you said something beautiful, which is 100% in line with God, in the teachings of Islam, which is, and you know this as an ex-Muslim probably, that when you go around, you have to say, peace be upon you. This is actually an Abrahamic teaching in Christianity and Judaism, and you have to go around wishing people well. That's what peace be upon you means. Like when you wish people well, that means in the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, it means you're free. You're telling that person that they're free from harm from your hand and your tongue, right?
Yes.
So fantastic. And I think that attitude, the reason why it's really powerful, because this is all about like bringing value to people, hopefully making their lives better. When you have that attitude, universal attitude to everybody, then you feel more connected. The reason why people are so disconnected because they have so much hate towards people. So you have to have that universal, zero expectations of other people love. Like, you're my brother, that's it, finished.
Yes.
I'm not expecting you to do anything for me. Anyway, sorry for disturbing, but I just thought I just want to flesh out some of the beautiful things you were saying and how they're very common between Buddhism and Islam.
Yeah, I mean, don't know what else to add. I mean, yeah, the 8 verses of
You were
Zen
going to tell me about what's permanent. That's what you said you were
yes,
going to
yes.
get
I mean,
to.
it
'Cause I think that's really important, because without that, giving up everything is just, you're just losing stuff, right? You have to be getting towards somewhere.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the idea with these teachings is that, you know, the enlightenment is the is the permanent thing. Basically, you do all these things, you know, to get that enlightenment. You know, that's kind of what's permanent. I mean, I don't know if there's enough time for me to really discuss what the enlightenment is, but even if there was, it's
Tell
kind
me
of
just a
something-
rough idea.
I mean, it's very hard to describe because I'm not really there yet. You know.
Okay, did you know that Buddhism, true Buddhism, they believe in God?
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me because actually, if you think of the idea of a rebirth, they have these actually. They believe if your karma is good enough, you can be reborn as like not necessarily a god, but they call them asuras and devas. So they're kind of demigods.
Cool. So in Islam, I should explain. I believe in the origins of Buddhism, but I think it can get mixed up with cultural teachings, right? So, for example, you mentioned essentially reincarnation, right? I believe all religions teach this very important idea of birth and rebirth and death and stuff like that, right? And so in Islam, you have to constantly go through a spiritual birth and death and rebirth. So let me explain that. So every time to get to a higher level of awareness, you have to give up some of your dependencies, and that's really hard. It feels like death. And so when you go through that death, when you let go of that, go through that suffering of some sort of death, sorry, this bike's going past my camera all the time, then it feels really painful, but then you come out more free. And you get to a higher level of awareness. Now, what I think has happened in Buddhism, because similar to what happened to Hinduism, right? I believe if you go to the origins of all these religions, they believed in one god, but then they started proliferating into all sorts of gods, like cow gods, and that makes sense. So, for example, if you depend on a cow, you start worshipping a cow, those kind of things. So, the people that Buddhism and Tibet, they really depended on the land. To value the land, value the worms and everything. It makes sense to, in some way, make them into God. But I think the original teaching was just kind of this idea, even in Christianity, being born again, right? But in Islam, it's constant. You just keep being reborn again. And then the idea of enlightenment is very similar to Islam, because in Islam there are 3 phases. Sorry for going on, but maybe it's interesting. I hope it's interesting. So there's the lowest phase, Nasir Amara, means, I don't know, you're an Arab, so hopefully I'm not pronouncing it too badly, okay, means kind of the animal state, right? There's no self-control. You're just using your emotions and things like that. But then the next phase is the self that tells you off, the self-reproving self. That's the next phase, when you're listening to your conscience, which is telling you off, and you're listening, and you're really weak, and you keep trying to develop. And then the final stage, which is enlightenment, is when you're free of that. Cool. You guys yeah, just doing a recording. Yeah, we'll be finished soon. Okay. So that's kind of like when you're free of your worldly desires, you're totally free, and there's no separation between you and God, basically. When you physically, there is in this life, right? But basically, in terms of so the whole point of Islam is letting go of the ego. That's what Islam means. Islam means peace on one side, and then the other meaning of Islam, which is the method, which is to submit your ego. Your ego is the thing that tells you to do stupid things, right? And then when you let go of that ego, then finally you're free. Anyway, so that's kind of like enlightenment. It is enlightenment.
But more or less, yeah. I couldn't have said it any better myself. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially the great teacher Thich Nhat Hanh basically said, a big part of the Enlightenment is the end of all conceptuality. And it's also actually...
Can you explain that? What does conceptuality mean?
It's,
because I'm now going to go into maybe things where we disagree, because I think we do have to be clearly define things. You have to have very practical ways, and there has to be good and bad, otherwise you don't know where you're going. So let's talk about conceptuality. You just mentioned that.
Well, I guess it ties into the teaching of emptiness, and I think this is probably where we'll disagree.
Good, finally. We want to find some direction. So the differences might help, right? And we're friends anyway. It doesn't matter if we disagree.
Well, emptiness. Okay, talking about ego. Let's start with ego. So, what is the self? Actually, is kind of what Buddhism has. Tries to answer. And we think of the self as basically. Well, I'll give you an example, then I'll tie it into the self. So if you think of a car, what is a car? Well, it's okay, you got your metal body, you got your glass windows, you got steering wheel, you got an engine, battery, wheels, and essentially it's made up of parts, but the car doesn't really exist inherently outside of those parts. If you think about it, and then if you think about ourselves, it's basically this body, but then it's the mind that imputes I am. So there's no, arguably they'd say if the mind doesn't impute it, there is no really inherently existent me or self. It does exist, but only as an imputation of the mind. So that's the idea of emptiness. But then Buddhism kind of goes really crazy, and then it applies that to everything in reality.
So you're saying you know what? There might be an agreement, actually. You might be surprised, okay?
It basically says right now I think I'm talking to you and there's a nice park and these trees, but it kind of basically says, I don't know how much time we have, but the idea is that this world we live in is not quite as concrete as we think it is. It's not quite as physically solid as we think it is.
Yeah, and practically, in terms of literally physics, right, most of space is empty. Right?
Yes.
So there's a lot of reality behind what you're saying, right? And I'll tell you how you might be surprised, but basically, in short, everything is God, right? Where there is nothing except for God. So then you say, how comes we're here? I think, from my understanding of that, because in Islam, there's a fundamental description of who God is, the one where everything comes from, everything depends on, all this kind of stuff. And essentially, there is only God, and we are all temporary. So I see us as fluctuations in energy, temporary fluctuations in energy. Like if God is the skipping rope, hopefully nobody gets insulted by this. It's just kind of like a metaphor, right? Then if you make a wave in the skipping rope, that's us. We're the wave. We're an illusion of something, of the greater thing. So I kind of feel like, disappointingly, we're kind of agreeing. We're kind of agreeing. Find something else. But I think my definition is a bit more useful, because it says that you can't just say there is nothing, and when in reality there is something.
There is something. It says,
and I say that something is essentially God.
Ah, yes. Well, I mean, I guess Buddhism kind of says how we got this human body. They say it's basically it's to do with mind and karma, right? It says the human life is a result of positive karma in past actions. That's how you got this human body. But I guess there's that Tibetan teacher Dzongkar Rinpoche who said, the 6 realms are, human, animal, and you have the lower realms of.
I think he did it on purpose. Yeah. Anyway, he saw it. Anyway, never mind.
Oh yeah, they see the camera, but they don't think to go around.
He aimed for it. Anyway.
Sorry. So he says these realms. You have, as I said, the Asuras Devas, then Asuras Devas, the human, then animal, then you have a hungry ghost, and then you have hell right at the bottom. I mean, he said it's a result of our own karma, our mind, our consciousness, and the actions. That's what created it. But I guess it kind of ties into it doesn't really have all the answers in that regard to creation, because then it would lead, well, where did the mind come from, and consciousness and stuff like that. I mean, I don't really have an answer for that. So I guess
So I think
what you did in terms of creation, where did everything come from? Where did it all begin? I guess Islam has a better answer.
which is naturally there has to be a creator, call it God or whatever you want, right? Okay. Now I really kind of the basis of this question, as you know, is one of my students asked this question, and I'm going to try to make it focused on what she had in mind.
Kind of got on
No, it might have helped. Who knows? Who knows? It's not just for her,
went
but
around a whole trip around the sun there.
maybe. I think I'm not, but I'm not sure if that was a bad thing, because we're so materialistically orientated that we kind of need to see the bigger picture to be able to deal with. You know, we need to think of success as something else outside materialism. So maybe that little journey is a good, healthy thing, right? So this is a young person about 15, young girl about 15. She might think she's not that young, but who knows? All perspective, right? And she's worried about, you know, the strains of GCSEs and being successful and making it. And I think part of that is the worry about other people's opinions, and I think that was kind of tight. This is the reason why I was talking about with you, because your thing was the beginning of sort of your little journey into spirituality was like, oh, I was really disrespected, and you know, other people's opinions kind of overwhelmed me, let's say, in a way, right?
Exactly.
And I'll give a really simple answer, and I'll be intrigued about how to overcome this fear of failure, right? So, we are weak, mortal beings where we have a kind of almost a necessary fear of things, right? Because we're so weak, right? So it makes sense in some way, right? So how do you overcome that? How do you overcome the fear of other people's opinions? Because other people's opinions, they might hate us and then not give us a job, and all these millions of things that we could genuinely have a fear of, right? How do you overcome it? Do you have you overcome it? Well, I'm trying to say it in a Lord of the Rings way, right? So in Lord of the Rings, maybe I shouldn't go down this way. There's this one ring that rules them all, okay? In the same way, there's one fear that rules all other fears, which is fear of God, which is a common idea in Christianity as well. The fear of God is the root of all wisdom, okay? So when you go through the inescapable truth, which is we all have a conscience, right? We all have a conscience. Even in psychology, atheists agree with it, right? Okay. If we try to ignore it, then we pay. We can't sleep well, right? So if you listen to that conscience, which is God basically telling you what's going on, are you being a naughty boy, naughty girl, right? Then we're happy, right? So if you... Let me put it this way, because I think I'm explaining it really badly. Let me try one more time. If you fear God, then you no longer need to fear anybody else, because everybody else is puny, doesn't matter in comparison. Of course, you got to need to believe in God, and as a realistic thing, and there's too much proof in that direction, by the way. Scientifically, it's impossible to ignore God, but that'll be another discussion. Maybe it's another discussion. We could throw that in as well, maybe. But, yeah, my simple answer, because I'm not making it simple enough, is if you have fear of God, then you have fear of nothing else. Because God is the one who gives you your sustenance on this planet. Like, where do jobs come from, for example? Instead of fearing your boss, if you fear God, who gives the boss the things through which he creates your job. Right? If there was no air, there would be no job, because you wouldn't be able to do anything. If there was no water, there was no one thing, there would be no job. So it's God who's the ultimate sustainer. If you ask God and God helps you practically, and there's a living God, then you have no worries. Anyway, I talked a lot. What are your thoughts about how do you overcome fear of failure in this sort of context of, oh no, I need to pass my GCSEs, I need to get a job, and oh no, I might get fired from the job, blah blah blah.
Oh, yes. Well, slightly different to yours. I mean, like, I suppose I can only really speak from my own experience. And I guess going back to my story, well, I kind of explained it earlier, but it was the idea of, I guess, the duty to others that helps. So I think you should have your own concerns, but try in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything big, but try to I'm not going to necessarily say any particular religion, but just try to find a way in which you can be of service to humanity and all the living beings of this planet, whether it's something direct or indirect, you know, like whatever is in your capacity. That's what I'd say is number one, first of all. And there's methods. I mean, for me, again, I can only speak from my own experience, but the thing I like is really the 8 verses of training the mind, because that's kind of the foundations where all my knowledge of Buddhism kind of stemmed from. And one of the things is also your behavior.
Can you point out... So, okay, so what I've got so far is be of service to other people. How does that overcome fear of failure? I mean, I can see some things, but could you explain in a bit more detail?
Okay, so, because again, the idea of kind of what failure and success is, like, I guess, okay, it's recognizing the impermanence of you know, perhaps achieving something or not achieving something, like in terms of getting the pass mark on this exam, or not getting the pass mark. Like, you got to realize that, I guess, again, like going back to what I said about my degree, like I got the degree, nice, cool, but then, you know, the feeling kind of faded, and then it's like, oh well, I'm in the real world now. You know what? You know, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get this job? How am I going to...
So if you have a wrong target, then you're going to be disappointed. So if your target, it's nothing wrong with getting a degree,
Nothing wrong.
but that's not going to, if that's the target of your life, then you're going to be disappointed, because
Yes.
loads of people got a degree and stuff
Yes,
like
yes.
that, right? So if you've got a higher purpose that's well beyond your degree, which is, for me, is pleasing God, and that's a very shallow understanding of it. It's basically your eternal drive towards beauty.
Yes.
And beauty is through your actions, not putting makeup on or something weird like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if part of that journey is to learn stuff, to possibly with the intention of helping people, whether you pass the degree or not, but you learn the stuff and you had the right intention, you're already a success in my idea.
Yes.
Right? You might not make loads of money, but that wasn't your motive in the first place,
Yes.
right? So if you have the right motives, you're never going to be disappointed. I think that's what I call my North Star. God is my North Star. I just talked about it in my happiness class earlier on. If you have a North Star, when I say a North Star, is people who don't know what it means, it kind of means like it's what people can be guided by, that never moves, depending on, doesn't matter what happens in the world, right? It's anciently always true. This is the way, this is the direction. And if you never lose that, then you're going to have something called meaning. You've got a great meaning that never fails. And that's what Viktor Frankl said is the source of happiness.
Yeah.
So if you have that, what is the ultimate meaning? I don't want to make it too long and boring, so let's get, like, this is the one key thing that I feel like I'm missing from the Buddhist side. Although I believe Buddhism truly does believe in a God, and it's not plain enlightenment, okay, because it has to come from somewhere, right, like we agreed, right? But what is the ultimate meaning? Meaning means something of beauty, of service, of like something meaning. What is the ultimate meaning that is always true, your North Star as a Buddhist?
Well, I don't know if I can qualify as a Buddhist, but because I haven't actually been ordained. I should mention that I haven't officially been ordained. But
Sure.
you know, in the 8 verses of training the mind, which is kind of sacred to me, very much. Like I don't know if I can call myself a Buddhist, but I'm a follower of the 8 verses of training the mind, and you know, I would agree. I would agree with basically what it says in the very last verse, which basically answers your question: what is the North Star? And I'll quote it. I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but if memory serves correctly, it says, "Throughout all of the above practices, together with a mind that remains undefiled by stains and conceptions of the 8 worldly concerns, may I and all sentient beings be freed from the bondage of mistaken appearance." Actually, if you don't mind, I just want to get that. I want to
Cool,
make sure
yeah,
I
I'm trying to understand it as well.
I just want to make sure I haven't misquoted it. Yes, here it is. So yeah, furthermore, through all these method practices, together with a mind undefiled by stains and conceptions of the 8 worldly concerns, also translated as 8 extremes, and that sees all phenomena as illusory, May I and all sentient beings be freed from the bondage of mistaken appearance and conception.
So this is a statement, but not a method, as far as I can see. It's saying like,
Well, that's the North Star. I mean, you asked
Oh, I see.
what the North Star was. So that's kind of what my North Star is.
so the North Star is.
What's happening here?
Oh, there's a camera there. Sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. Sorry. Rather than Speaker's Corner, you know, craziness of Speaker's Corner. So your North Star, as it were.
Was my North Star.
Yeah, your North Star is to escape any misinterpret. Your North Star is to let go of physical concepts, maybe. Like
It's
Something
letting
like
go
that.
of all concepts, really. It's essentially there's the way things appear in this world, and then there's the way that they actually are.
yeah.
And it's kind of recognizing
Why is that meaningful?
why is that meaningful.
Yeah.
Um,
Any sense that you can find meaning. I can tell you meaning is a beautiful thing to keep growing forever. That's the idea of Islam. It's like even when you get to heaven, you're still growing. That's just another phase of your life, right? That's meaningful. Doing things for other people is meaningful
yes.
by anybody's definitions. What is meaningful about just letting go of everything, which is essentially what you said?
well, that's essentially their belief is that we have this human life, and one of the best ways to honor it, I believe, is by recognizing the nature of mind. You know, and that's kind of what that last passage was kind of talking about. It was saying we're in the pursuit of answering that question, and that's kind of the one of the, as far as Buddhists are concerned, you know, that recognizing our full potential as human beings is one of the best ways of sort of honoring the human life.
So I agree that there's some you can, if it's a bit more directed, losing the ego can help you.
Yes.
Right? Because the ego can make you do stupid things. You were going to say?
I mean, yes. I kind of got right to the end, but before that, there's a whole list of actually things you do. So
Right. Okay.
like there's a lot about actual behavior, and again, there's the kind of the service thing, but it's also the behavior. So
yeah, it's raining. That's a sign we might have to give up in a second.
is this going to be okay? All this?
I hope so. Okay, I'm just gonna have a bit of fun to test how much we can handle here. Not too much,
Yes.
don't worry. You got I've got a we're pretty good.
Yes.
All right.
Waterproof hat, actually. This one.
Perfect. I might have to copy it and look like a twin, but yeah, just to help my student a bit
Yes.
more, I think. One of the fears of failure is that Thank you. One of the fears of failure is we fear other people.
Yes.
How do we overcome fear of other people? I've already said that if you fear God, then you don't fear anybody else, and that's practically how I feel. But what would be your solution? And that would be the wind-up thing.
Well, again, it's that. Well, I guess okay. There are people who would want to do us harm.
Guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes. So I guess how it's a question. How do we not fear other people? Is that the way? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess. Okay. Well. In the 8 verses of Training the Mind, okay, he says, there's a part where he says, may I offer my help and happiness to all living beings, my mothers, right? And that's kind of the bit my mothers...
Say that again, sorry? My mothers.
My mother. He says, may I offer my help and happiness to all living beings, my mothers, right? The part about the mothers, and this is probably going to cause a bit of controversy, is that basically it's talking about the idea of like this rebirth thing, and it follows the principle of an infinite borrowing fallacy, right? And if you don't know what an infinite borrowing fallacy is, it's basically if I wanted £1 and I asked, I didn't have it, but I wanted one, so I asked you for £1, you don't have one. I asked this guy walking here, he doesn't have one. I asked the people over there, they don't have any. Maybe I go over there, further into the park.
Dude, borrowing fallacy.
It would just keep going and going until I got that £1. So the part about his mothers is saying, like, we've had all these thousands, countless past lives that at some point all living beings have been our mother and cared for us and loved for us greatly, and it goes back to the service thing. So I would say, I don't know if it would help you fear less, but I think it would in a sense, because it's kind of to develop that love and compassion for other people, number one. And then naturally you would have less disdain for them and possibly less fear.
So what does it mean when you said, I didn't understand a phrase, but what does it mean, like in easier English? What does it mean? Something about mothers you said, I didn't understand it.
I mean, that was actually just getting very into Buddhist philosophy. I don't think it's going to be helpful to answer the question, but the idea is like that service, and then it's also recognizing that you can always learn something from someone, you know, like in the 8 verses of Training the Mind, it says, you know, even if someone I have helped and of whom I had great hopes nevertheless harms me without reason, may I see him or her as my holy spiritual guide. When others out of jealousy or anger harm me or insult me, may I take defeat upon myself and offer them the victory. And
so accept defeat and offer people victory. I've got really thin legs in the tripod. That's why I think it's going to be knocked over any second. People get really close. I think I'll just finish it off now. First of all, I want to say thank you so much.
I don't know if that really answered your question.
It might help somebody, right? So you were saying something about, you know, accepting defeat and giving other people victory, which is an interesting idea.
That's just, again, my experience. You know, I can only speak from my experience. Also, I should add, you know, it would be presumptuous to say I know everything about Buddhism, you know.
Same here, I don't know anything about Islam.
You know, I'm just a humble enthusiast of the past 2 years, and I hope I can give a fairly decent general overview. I mean, and if I've said anything perhaps incorrect, you know, the problem is not with the Buddha or the Dharma or the Sangha, the problem's with me, actually.
Sure. So, I mean, we're both kind of students of different forms of faith ideologies, whatever, and we're kind of representing it as just students rather than masters, let's say, right? So, same thing, comparing like with like sort of thing, right? So, this idea of, I do like in some way the idea of just saying, you know what, okay, I'll accept sort of defeat, as it were, and offer you the victory. That's fine. In a way, the Islamic way is more like the only. This is the thing I think is really practical. Is Allahu Akbar, which means God is the greatest. So when you're never the one who wins in the first place. All success is due to God. It was never your success or failure, whatever. You work on your weaknesses, and that's all. In this discussion, I'm not going to win or lose or anything. I'm just being of service like you're being of service. Anyway, let's wind it up. I think we agreed on a ton of things. Yes. Not that we intended to. I don't know what was going to happen, but it was pretty good. And we had fun. Yes. Wait, you're laughing. I enjoyed it. I think we were good ambassadors of our different faith ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on your show. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.